Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today you're joining us as we unpack the work of Lawrence Kohlberg and its pretty profound influence on how professionals learn to navigate the complexities of ethics. We've got a really compelling article that dives into Kohlberg's contributions to professional ethics education, looking at his core ideas and why they're still so relevant for you, in today's fast-paced world.
Right.
Our mission, basically, is to distill the essential insights from Kohlberg's theories and their practical application, giving you valuable knowledge quickly and, thoroughly.
That's right. And it's fascinating, isn't it, when you think that for ages, serious talk about ethics was pretty much kept within philosophy departments or, religious institutions.
Yeah, really walled off.
But as our source points out, the last couple of decades have seen this huge surge of interest in ethics across, basically all professions: accounting, computer science, engineering, medicine, law, you name it. It's become this really interdisciplinary push to give professionals a solid ethical compass.
And it really makes you think about how our understanding has, shifted. Because if you rewind about 30 years before this article came out, so maybe around 1968.
Yeah, how about then?
A study found that, get this, half of the business people interviewed defined ethics as just what my feelings tell me is right.
Wow, just feelings.
Yeah. Okay, let's just pause on that. Imagine making big professional calls based only on a gut feeling. It really highlights this past reliance on, subjective stuff rather than any structured ethical thinking.
Exactly. And that's really where Lawrence Kohlberg's work became so important, so influential.
Right.
His big contribution, really groundbreaking at the time, was showing that moral reasoning isn't just some abstract idea, it's a real cognitive thing. He showed our ability to think, to reason, plays a huge part in how we actually make moral judgments. That was a major shift away from ethics being purely about feelings.
So let's get into the core of Kohlberg's framework.
Yeah.
He proposed this really interesting model, 6 stages of moral development, right? Each with a different way of looking at moral issues.
That's it, 6 distinct stages.
Now, the article we're digging into stresses that for professional ethics, those later stages, what Kohlberg called post-conventional reasoning, they're really key. And it seems to agree with others, like James Rest, on this.
Yes, the focus shifts there.
So what makes this post-conventional stage so vital in, say, a professional setting?
Well, what's so interesting is that post-conventional reasoning is like a fundamental change in how people think about morality. It's about moving past just following rules or, blindly accepting what society says.
Okay.
It involves a more critical, independent look at the underlying moral principles. Instead of just asking, what are the rules? Someone using post-conventional reasoning might ask, why do we have these rules? Are they actually fair? Do they serve a greater good for everyone involved?
But, and the article points this out, Kohlberg's specific take on these later stages wasn't, universally loved. He seemed to suggest the highest levels meant adopting specific philosophies like utilitarianism, maximizing good, or Kantian ethics, focusing on universal duties.
Right, he tied it to specific philosophical schools.
And the article asks a really interesting question. Does a truly mature moral view have to line up with one single big principle like that?
And that really gets to a critical point about moral maturity itself. Do you need to pick one unified moral theory to be at the top level of ethical reasoning?
Yeah, is that the only way?
Or could a more maybe pluralistic approach, drawing on different ethical ideas, or even just a strong focus on care and responsibility, be just as valid at that post-conventional level? The article kind of suggests that maybe limiting advanced morality to just a couple of specific philosophies is a bit too narrow.
And this leads us to a really key distinction, even if we kind of bracket the exact 6 stages for a moment. The article highlights the difference between conventional and post-conventional moral thinking.
Right, that core difference.
And it mentions James Rest and his colleagues proposed 3 broader schemas.
Yeah.
Personal interest, maintaining norms, and post-conventional. Let's dig into that maintaining norms idea. That sounds pretty central to how society works, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The maintaining norm schema is very close to Kohlberg's stage 4, the sort of law and order orientation.
Okay.
The core idea here is relying heavily on established practices and rules that give society structure. There's an acceptance of these norms, a sense of duty to uphold them, respect authority.
Makes sense.
Think about it. You recognize we need rules for society to work. Rules that ideally apply to everyone consistently based on reciprocity, right? I follow the rules, you follow the rules. And authority figures are generally seen as legitimate rule makers.
Okay, yeah, that clicks. It's about keeping the existing social machine running smoothly. Now, how does post-conventional thinking break from that?
So the post-conventional schema, it actually builds on some of those maintaining norms, ideas, needing cooperation, universal principles, consistency, reciprocity, all that's still there.
Right.
But the crucial difference is that element of independent evaluation we talked about. Post-conventional thinking doesn't just accept laws and practices blindly.
It questioned them.
Exactly. It critically examines them based on fundamental shareable ideals. It recognizes that maybe existing norms have biases or unfairly hurt some groups. It's about getting behind the rules, understanding the why, and asking if they truly promote justice and fairness for everyone.
So why is this ability for post-conventional thinking so incredibly important for professionals? It sounds like it goes way beyond just being a good citizen.
Oh, absolutely. In the professional world, just relying on existing laws and practices often isn't enough.
Right. Things change too fast.
Exactly. Those norms can't possibly predict every complex situation, especially in fields like tech or medicine that are evolving so quickly. Professionals constantly hit novel, tricky challenges where the rules might be unclear or maybe even conflict with each other. Plus, professional judgment always involves discretion. Codes of ethics are great guides, but they're broad principles. They need interpretation, application.
Yeah, like conflict of interest. What does that really mean in this specific case?
Precisely. Or confidentiality, informed consent. These are big concepts needing nuanced understanding in different situations. Think about AI current privacy laws might not fully cover the ethics of new AI uses. Professionals have to go beyond just the law and use post-conventional thinking about fairness, potential harm.
And the article actually brings some good news here. It mentions James Rest's research suggests way more adults are capable of post-conventional thinking than Kohlberg initially thought. What's the reason for that difference?
Well, Kohlberg's original standards for hitting those top stages were pretty tough, often needing reasoning that lined up with specific, sometimes complex philosophical ideas.
Right, Ibar.
Rest and his colleagues used broader criteria. They focused more on the capacity for critical evaluation, the ability to explain why you're making a moral choice.
Okay, more about the process.
Yeah. And this more inclusive approach suggests many professionals, and maybe people generally, have a greater ability to critically examine ethical norms than Kohlberg's early work might have suggested.
Now, the article then goes into this really interesting zone where the lines between conventional and post-conventional thinking can get kind of blurry in practice. It uses examples like teaching history or even Ronald Dworkin's ideas about fairness. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, this is quite insightful. The idea is that learning and really internalizing established conventions can actually help develop critical thinking skills.
How so?
Well, take teaching U.S. history. Sure, you learn the conventions, the Constitution, key events, but you also inevitably look at historical injustices, struggles for change, debates about how to interpret those very documents.
Right, you critique as you learn.
Exactly. So the process of learning the norms can give you the tools to evaluate them critically. Similarly, Dworkin's view on fairness suggests understanding fairness isn't just accepting current norms, it's also being able to apply the concept in new situations and even challenge existing ideas of what's fair.
So just because we might seem to accept certain norms without question sometimes, doesn't mean we lack the basic ability to think critically about them in other situations.
Precisely. The potential for critical thought seems to be there, even if it's not always switched on or obvious. However, the article also reminds us, research on teenagers often shows more thinking driven by personal gain or just maintaining norms.
Yeah, makes sense.
And of course, those famous Milgram experiments showed how easily adults can just uncritically obey authority under certain conditions.
That's always sobering to think about.
It really is. It just underscores how important it is to actively cultivate that post-conventional mindset, especially in high-pressure jobs. So while the capacity might be widespread, it's not always the default mode.
Okay, this brings us to the challenge of actually measuring someone's moral reasoning level. The article mentions the Defining Issues Test, the DIT, which uses moral dilemmas. Tell us about that and the problems with these kinds of tests.
Right, the DIT. It gives people hypothetical dilemmas. The classic Heinz one about stealing a drug is often used and asks them to rate the importance of different factors in making a decision.
Okay.
These factors are designed to reflect different moral schemas. So worrying about upholding the law might point to maintaining order, while focusing on basic human rights might suggest post-conventional thought.
Makes sense.
But here's the tricky part the article highlights. Someone responding to Heinz might look like they're prioritizing the law, which seems like maintaining order. But their underlying reasoning could still have post-conventional bits. Maybe they're thinking about the wider societal chaos if everyone broke laws, or the limits of the legal system itself.
So the test might not capture the full picture.
Exactly. It shows how hard it is to reliably pin down the full depth of someone's moral thinking with standardized tests, because they might only show a sliver of it in a specific kind of artificial scenario.
This has some really big implications for professional ethics codes, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Because those codes are basically the established norms for a profession.
Absolutely. Professions build their own sets of norms, often put down in detailed ethics codes. These codes are the conventional wisdom for that specific practice.
Right.
But, and the article stresses this, what's accepted isn't always right. These codes aren't set in stone, they change over time. They reflect shifts in society's values, new knowledge, a deeper understanding of what professionals owe people.
Like the engineering example.
Yeah, the shift in engineering codes from mainly loyalty to the boss towards prioritizing public safety and the environment. That's a great example of this evolution.
And even with good codes, they don't just give you a simple checklist for every ethical problem, right? Professionals still have to use their own judgment.
Precisely. Codes give vital guidance, a framework, but they always need interpretation and careful application to unique, often unexpected situations. Professionals need the autonomy, the ability to critically look at current practices and figure out how best to uphold the core ethical principles in new contexts.
Yeah.
Plus, the very act of choosing to follow a profession's code can be seen as a voluntary, autonomous commitment. It shows you've thought about it and aligned with those shared values. So referring to the code isn't just blind rule following. It can involve critical judgment in choosing to commit to those standards.
The article also mentions that moral judgment in professional ethics often uses these thick concepts specific to the profession, not just abstract philosophy. What are some examples of those thick concepts?
Think about core ideas like confidentiality in law and medicine, or informed consent in healthcare and research, or the huge importance of safety in engineering, or conflicts of interest which pop up everywhere.
All right, things with very specific professional meanings.
Exactly, they're context-rich concepts. Ethical dilemmas often come up in the tricky interpretation and application of these ideas in complex, maybe ambiguous situations, and professionals who develop and follow the best practices around these thick concepts might very well be using sophisticated post-conventional reasoning, even if they're not quoting philosophers.
So given all these layers and complexities in professional ethics, where does the article suggest psychological research should go next? It sounds like it's arguing for a change in focus.
Yeah, it proposes two main shifts. First, moving away from Kohlberg's sort of foundationalist ideas about the ultimate basis of morality and focusing more on what the philosopher Henry Sidgwick called middle axioms.
Middle axioms, what are those?
They're the everyday, practical ethical concerns professionals deal with, like honesty in reporting, balancing loyalty to your company with wider duties, managing conflicts of interest.
Okay, the real world stuff.
Exactly. The idea is that sharp, critical thinking is crucial for clarifying and improving these shared professional standards to tackle real ethical problems, even if we don't solve the huge philosophical debates about ultimate moral truth.
That makes a lot of practical sense. Focus on the tangible issues. What's the second suggested shift for research?
The second big shift is broadening the research scope beyond just looking at dramatic moral dilemmas.
Not just the Heinz dilemmas.
Right. While dilemmas teach us a lot, the article argues moral reasoning happens in many other situations too, applying principles in straightforward cases, dealing with ambiguity, negotiating compromises, prioritizing conflicting values. Future research should look at how professionals develop skills like good fact-finding, spotting assumptions, clarifying complex ideas, managing disagreements constructively. All these are vital parts of practical moral development in professional life.
And the article also brings up James Rest's broader four-component model of moral development. It sounds like that gives a fuller picture than just moral judgment. What are those other parts?
Right. Rest's model is more comprehensive. It includes moral sensitivity, basically, recognizing an ethical issue is even present, moral motivation, prioritizing ethical values over other things like profit or convenience, and moral character, having the willpower and skills to actually do the ethical thing, especially when it's tough.
Okay, so sensitivity, motivation, character, and judgment.
Exactly. And the article really pushes for more research in these other areas, asking questions like, What helps people consistently do the right thing, even when tempted not to? What teaching methods actually build that ethical commitment?
Yeah, important question.
How can people overcome their own biases and moral decisions? How do we boost moral awareness? How do professionals deal with others' wrongdoing beyond just whistleblowing? What character traits help with that?
Mhm.
What about group dynamics? How do things like groupthink or ethics committees help or hinder ethical behavior? What's the psychology behind making ethical compromises without losing your integrity? And how does a person's sense of self, their identity, affect how they handle moral problems? Lots to explore there.
Wow, this has been a really illuminating deep dive into Lawrence Kohlberg's work and how it still echoes in professional ethics today. So to kind of wrap up the key insights for you, our listener, Kohlberg was crucial in showing that moral reasoning matters for ethics, especially developing that post-conventional thinking, the ability to critically assess norms.
Mm.
And while his specific stages have been debated, refined by people like Rest, that core difference between just following rules,
Mm.
conventional, and critically evaluating them, post-conventional, is still a really useful idea.
Definitely.
And as we've seen, applying this to the professional world shows how messy ethical decisions can be. Just following the code often needs real thought and independent judgment.
Exactly. And the big takeaway, maybe, is that being an ethical professional isn't just about learning the rules in a handbook. It's about actively building the skill to critique those rules, understand the why behind them, and apply those deeper principles thoughtfully, bravely in all the tricky situations work throws at you.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. Think about the ethical standards in your own field, or even just your daily life. How often are you mostly relying on the established way of doing things, the accepted norms? And how often do you actively step back and question the principles underneath or the wider impact?
And building on that, thinking about Rest's broader model sensitivity, motivation, character, judgment, which part of your moral development feels most relevant right now? Maybe it's getting better at spotting subtle ethical issues or finding the courage to act on your values when it's hard. What specific area might you want to explore more for yourself?
That brings us to the end of our deep dive for today. We hope this has given you some valuable things to think about. Until next time, keep thinking critically.